Well, hello, hello, hello. Thank you guys for joining us today. We are so excited about this panel. In fact, we're running a little bit late because we were already starting to get into some of the conversation. I think AI native payments and agentic commerce have now emerged as one of the biggest use cases for AI agents. Agents can already hold funds, they can initiate payments, they can transact with services, and they can do all of that with minimum human input. So I think we have lots of questions that we want to talk about today. And I love this panel because it brings together three layers of the stack. But before I go there, my name is Sandy Carter. I am CEO of a company called Equus AI, which is a privacy-based AI company focused on the trust layer of AI. But I'm also a Forbes contributor, a senior Forbes contributor for AI as well. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to have my panelists introduce themselves. The cool thing is they each represent each layer of the stack, agent ownership and orchestration, the wallet infrastructure, and then the payment rails as well. So as each of you introduce yourselves, could you also tell me what your definition is of agentic commerce? And David, I'm going to start first with you.
Hey Sandy, thanks for having us. So I'm David, co-founder and CEO at Valerie. We're labs contributing to Olas. At Olas, we're all about owning your agent, so really at this application layer. We have a consumer application that's called Pearl, like the pearl you find on a beach. And you basically can self-custody various agentic applications there. The primary use case right now being prediction markets, on market for instance. And as we've been building this since 2021, we've kind of experimented with a lot of things. And one element that keeps coming back is this sort of coordination that you need when you have agentic commerce. And so to let you have my definition of agentic commerce, I think it's effectively if one software program purchases a service from another software program, and obviously if they are more autonomous, we tend to call them agents. Sometimes it's simply automation. I think then they sometimes also fall into this. And what's particularly exciting here is that it's fully without human intermediation. So, it's machines or software talking to software, machines talking to machines. And in this context, I think the concept of agent economies is a term which also increasingly comes up. And that's something where Olas is also very focused on. So not just like how do you have one consumer application where a user can own their agent, but then also how do you kind of bootstrap entire economies where some agents maybe serve the other agents, and so you have this sort of commerce between agents. So yeah, I think I'm on the right panel to discuss this with you all.
You are on the right panel to discuss that. And I also love that you guys were, I think, the first AI agent app store as well. I think I read an article about you for that first AI agent app store.
Certainly the first self-hosted one, yeah. So there we go.
That's great. That's great. Okay, Nitya, you've done some amazing things too. Could you introduce yourself and then tell us what you think agentic commerce is?
Of course. Thanks for having me. I'm Nithya. I'm the founder and CEO of Para. We build wallet infrastructure, basically making it easier for our customers and all kinds of different folks working in payments to more easily provision wallets. And the reason why wallets specifically are important is because whenever you're using a blockchain for a transaction, you need a wallet to actually sign that transaction. And so we kind of think about the wallet as the connectivity layer to blockchains. And so certainly a lot has happened on the agentic commerce side. With us, actually, the very first examples we were seeing were folks building trading bots. That maybe started 18 months ago. Nowadays, I think the definition is very much expanded. I kind of think of there being two separate parts of the workflow that have kind of both tied into agentic commerce. The first is agentic discovery. So this is an agent selecting a service. And then the second component is an agent completing the transaction to actually make that purchase, acquire that software, those goods and services, whatever it may be. Sometimes both of those steps will happen by agents, but I think even if just one of them is happening with an agent, that's agentic commerce.
Awesome. I like that definition of agentic commerce as well. And you were a little bit humble there. You guys build the wallet infrastructure for over 15 million users across 100 apps, if I have that right. That's pretty impressive. So thank you for joining us, Nitya, as well. Okay, and last but definitely not least, we have Will as well. Will, talk to us a little bit about the little known company called Cloudflare.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I'm a director of product at Cloudflare. Started there a few months ago after spending half a decade working on my own startup in the crypto space. I'm on the agent payments team, where we're focused on bringing agentic micropayments to Cloudflare, primarily via stablecoins. We want to make it really easy to sell products on Cloudflare by allowing you to configure monetization in just a few clicks via a product we call Monetization Gateway. And we want to make it really easy to buy products via Cloudflare via wallets that we recently announced as well. This ties into my own personal definition of agentic commerce, which is purchasing and fulfillment of goods by non-human actors. There's two things I'd note, which Nitya and David have touched on, which is purchasing is not enough. You also need fulfillment. If you don't have fulfillment, you only have half the journey. And then the other side is non-human actors. Everyone's talking about AI agents making purchases. Great, but what about a backend? What about an API that's paying other APIs? The shape of that looks very similar to an AI agent, more similar to them than a human. So I think the non-human category is broader than just AI.
That's a great definition. That is true. I would agree with that completely. So let's go on to a question. I'd love for all of you to jump in if you want to. Think about one transaction that an AI agent completed, an AI agent either on your platform or in the wild, without a human improving every step. So for me, I wanted to buy a dress. I set up an agent to watch when it went on sale. When it went on sale, the agent automatically bought the dress because it went below my threshold, purchased it. In fact, it just arrived today. What about for you guys? What's one transaction an agent completed either on your platform or in the wild? Anybody want to jump in on that?
I can
Sure,
start.
can go. Oh, yeah, you go.
Oh,
Okay.
Perfect. Yeah. Ours is on our platform. So a few months back, we had a prediction market that launched with Para integrated. We came to know that Para's integrated because we saw some analytics and then reached out to the team, and turns out they actually didn't even know that they had chosen Para, and so they really just had an agent setting up our infrastructure, integrating it, and then ultimately completing the payment.
Interesting. And it all went smoothly, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for us, the final payment screen was one that at that time we still require a human in the loop for. But yeah, the whole process of kind of discovery, setup, and then eventually kind of moving to the one human in the loop step was really cool to see. This was a few months ago, and I think we were kind of early on in this journey of agents making purchases.
Awesome. David, did you want to add something in, an example?
Yeah, I'll stay with the use case. In 2023, we actually, for the first time, did this sort of agent-to-agent commerce, and it was also with prediction markets. Basically, back then on the Omen platform, since then it's grown a lot, so it's been over 14 million times now that agents on Olas kind of interacted in this sort of commerce setting. And what I like about this use case is, so just to quickly describe it again, there's on the demand side, there's an agent that wants to purchase effectively a prediction relating to some market that it finds in some public prediction market platform. So for instance, Polymarket. And obviously you could just have the agent, for instance, call a model that it has an API key for already and sort of rely on whatever that spits out. But if you actually spend some time on this, then as Will has just pointed out, it's not just about purchasing. You don't just want to pay for this. You also want to get this order fulfilled. And when you think about the fulfillment, it's not just that you want something that arrives in some form, right? It should be good. And so like this element of verifiability and like sort of having quality service being delivered is actually quite nice with prediction markets because services like be it in this case effectively these prediction workflows. They can obviously publish like metrics on how well they're doing, and in fact, every consumer can, after the fact, evaluate, once they had a bunch of such purchases, whether, for instance, this customized prediction workflow does well on predicting the future in the specific markets. And so that's been serving Olas quite well. There have been a lot of users running these agents that then sort of autonomously purchase these predictions from these specialized agents on the supply side of our marketplace. And obviously there's at that point no human in the loop. It's just the agent making a payment and then receiving the prediction and can be able, it can then use that in the context of whatever it is doing. So maybe it will then take a position in the market or not, depending on what it assesses that to be.
Interesting. So 2 examples with, I don't know if your first one was with Polymarket, but prediction markets, which I think are super hot right now. Will, are you going to continue that use case, or do you have another one?
I mean, our platform at Cloudflare is still rolling out, so we hope to dramatically expand the number of APIs and services available for agentic commerce. But while it's still rolling out, I'll give a personal example, which is that I found it really useful for research, both quantitative and qualitative. So one simple example is like if you want to research various assets, CoinGecko's API is entirely available via X402. So you can pull really good historical information on it for the quantitative side. And then there's a pretty cool platform, DripStack, which basically offers Substack finance articles as micropayments in coordination with the authors themselves. And that can give you qualitative research. So you can equip an agent with hard data and also human analysis and produce really good results. If you do just one, it can be a little varied in quality, but I think that quantitative and qualitative side is extremely interesting.
That's a great example too, micropayments for articles. And I love that example because then it sounds like you're also paying back the creators because they're getting the payments too. So that's got multiple examples there. Okay, so I do have my X open, and I did just get a question coming in. And it said, this sounds just like autopay or having a saved credit card. Is this actually different? What makes an agent transaction different than just autopay or a saved credit card? Anyone want to jump in on that one? And thank you, Gregory, for that question.
Yeah, I think in my mind, one key difference is that it is, in agentic commerce, it is easier to set guardrails on an agent, especially when using stablecoins. So, for example, Para knows this deeply. They have spent a lot of time on adding really, really good controls on how spend happens. But you can tell agents, here's $10. Go spend it on whatever you wish. I trust your judgment. But you can't spend $100. You can't spend $1,000. You're capped at 10. You can do that with credit cards if you issue virtual cards, but these virtual cards are often much more complex for merchants as well because they can't necessarily trust those cards either. So if you try to use virtual cards in a lot of places, it's blocked because the merchant is worried about the fraud risk. You use stablecoins, you give it to an agent, the merchant is receiving the money instantly. They don't have to worry about anything that happens after that point. Once the stablecoins are in their wallet, they're safely in their wallet. So I do think that from the merchant side, it is a very meaningful improvement. I can see where from the buyer side, high level, yeah, credit cards and stablecoins look pretty similar as primitives, but I think the acceptance rates for stablecoins will be much higher, the fees will be much lower, and the transaction sizes can be much smaller, all of which are very substantial benefits for these kinds of use cases.
Okay, that's a great answer. I'm going to go next to Buffstar, who also asked a question. And he asked, who is legally on hook when the agent spends money? Is it the user, is it the developer, or is it the platform? Who wants to take a stab at that one?
I can take one maybe step towards one. I'll say that these are all very much emerging areas from when it comes from like a pure like recourse and mediation of claims, and a lot of that field is still emerging. I do think that this ties very deeply into the notion of identity, which is to say, like, if someone provisions an agent and that agent makes a fraudulent purchase, or like someone's agent commits fraud, who's on the hook? We're seeing that in all of this, having a notion of identity that exists and pertains specifically to that agent, but also relates to other agents that this same user might provision, is really important. So one thing that actually predates agentic payments that we've been really focused on at Para is this idea of having portability exist with respect to wallets. So I might have a wallet that I create on one platform, but how do I tie that identity back to a wallet created on another platform? I think this is going to be really critical when it comes to fighting fraud specifically, where you want a known fraudulent user or like creator of agents that are maybe setting out to do fraud, so there's an intent, that needs to be tied back to some kind of information and reputation that other platforms can gain access to. So similar to how we exist in many spaces, but we have like a core identity, it is important for attribution of agent identity to tie back to a human. I think this is an interesting element as well, where there's an element of who's at fault. So if, giving the guardrail example that Will shared, one clear example might be a user sets guardrails and an action occurs that's outside of those guardrails. That is a clear example where the user is less at fault than if guardrails are set and a mistaken purchase is made within those guardrails.
Yeah, I'll add something there.
Yeah, sure, David.
I think like Will said something great, or explained something great around this change, which comes with stablecoins because of their instantaneous settlement nature. So he talked about what that means for the merchant side. Actually, it's interesting because if you go, I think some of the use cases we discussed are sort of more traditional B2B, and I expect that there will be a lot of agentic commerce adoption there to optimize backends and whatnot. I'm sure Will has a lot to say about that. But then if you go more to the sort of crypto native side, I guess, like you always come from this, okay, it's permissionless by design, it's instantaneous, it's irreversible. And so actually like a lot of the questions are sort of on the side of the consumer as to like how, do they trust this service agent? Does it have a reputation maybe? But then you have those, Sybil problems, so how do you solve that? And then that kind of pushes towards maybe more verifiable type of use cases where, the output itself is more obviously, maybe not perfectly, verifiable, but it's sort of more in the verifiable domain than non-verifiable domain, because you can more easily ascertain whether the service provider actually has provided any service at all once you even see the response. So that was something that came to mind here, and I think a lot of these sort of, I'm not a lawyer, but when we talk to lawyers about these topics, a lot of these questions are surprisingly answered the same as with other iterations of software. There's like sort of often the question of, okay, who is actually like giving the instruction for something, who is running it, who is hosting it, what exactly does the platform do? So I think you can't answer this in generality. There's like, the specifics of what service does the platform offer versus what the application does versus what the service provider does. That will probably give you the answer in any specific use case.
Yeah, it's interesting. Go ahead, Will.
I also think there's an important shift as we go from credit cards to stablecoins, which is that in the credit card world, there's always a very clearly accountable merchant of record. So take your favorite platform, App Store, whatever else. The App Store and platform is playing a very useful role by being the merchant of record who is connecting buyers and sellers and is then responsible for both sides of the marketplace. Now, stablecoins are interesting because they're peer-to-peer. In a stablecoin app store, someone sends money directly from a buyer to a seller. And because stablecoins settle instantly and there's no fraud risk, you become more worried about seller-side fraud than buyer-side fraud. Many marketplaces have flipped. You're way more worried about buyer-side fraud than seller-side fraud in many cases. So I think like stablecoins are not just a payment innovation, but they also change which party is primarily at risk. It goes from the seller being the primary risk taker to the buyer being the primary risk taker, which, if you're looking at things like LLM inference, where the seller might be paying $5 in costs under the hood, and the buyer is coming in and has potential fraud risk, you start actually to want that relationship to change in a way that stablecoins do enable.
So since, David, you brought up reputation, I'm going to ask this question here. Tell me about agents. Should agents have a reputation? And if so, how do you score them? Do you score them on, or maybe this is Nitya or Will, whoever wants to jump in on it. How do you score them? Because an agent might behave really well in 1 week and then the next week not. What do you guys think? Nitya, do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, I can kick us off. So this is where we have been really focused around user identity. So there is ultimately a party that is provisioning an agent and giving it a goal. And that user, there should be some kind of common notion of this user across maybe the 100 agents that they're provisioning. So that is really important. But you, of course, then also need to account for the nuance of you might have a single agent that goes rogue. And that could be due to a variety of failures, whether malicious or not, across the full kind of layer of dependencies there. Like it could be an LLM hallucination, it could be a software error, like whatever it is. I think a lot of this is going to look similar to how cards evolved, where you do have a notion of transactions. Those are discrete actions. Maybe they're completely right or completely wrong. I think with LLMs, there's going to be more nuance involved, but I think there will be an element of reporting transactions, disputing agent transactions that will then trigger dispute resolutions to understand where things went wrong.
So I might have an agent. My agent has a reputation, like, yes, good to transact with this agent, or mixed, or absolutely not, that kind of thing. So it'd be a sliding scale, is what I heard you say. Will, what do you think? What do you guys think at Cloudflare about reputation for an agent? Is it the agent that has a reputation, or is it the person who operates the agent?
Yeah, so I think there's an important prerequisite, which is a stable identifier. So if an agent can rotate its identity, you can't really build a foundation off it in the first place. So you need to have some kind of stable property. We have a protocol called WebBot Auth, which is basically a stable identifier for bots. So that bots can identify themselves via a key pair and say, yep, here's who I am across requests. And when we announced Cloudflare wallets, we announced actually a agentic identity primitive with it, which is basically these handles called Cloudflare Pay handles that you can then use to optionally and voluntarily identify yourself and your agent. And the way we see it is that it's essentially this kind of almost like subdomain nesting. So there's an organization or a human who's asking an agent to do something. So you care about the identity of the organization or human, but then you also care about the identity of a specific agent, because maybe one agent is, a research agent acting on behalf of employees, and maybe one agent is a backend service that's automatically buying, image generation or LLM inference on behalf of customers. So the ability to give both agents and humans a stable identifier is very important in my mind. Now, reputation scores for agents is a very hard problem. I mean, Cloudflare has been doing bot detection since basically the beginning of its history, and we have bot scores, and there's a lot of work that goes into producing those bot scores. I don't think we're going to solve agentic identity from a quantitative perspective overnight, but at the very least, allowing agents to identify themselves lets you get the qualitative side of who's actually working on this and what are they using it for, which is more than most protocols have available today.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, this is such a new area. You know, we're writing the playbook as we go along, right? Because a lot of these questions that people are writing into me, we're thinking about, but they are, like you said, Will, they're really hard problems, right? So David, I'm going to go back to you. What is the most exciting agentic use case that you see that's getting traction right now?
Yeah, maybe before I answer this question, like actually just on this point, I think like it, yeah, because we are at this sort of cusp of like AI acceleration, or certainly massive AI development. We sometimes want to boil the ocean, like everyone wants to sort of do everything at once. And I think you're right that like it pays off to start with an actual problem. And I think a lot of the kind of discussion so far was actually very grounded in that regards, and what came through was like, look, like you have to look on the actual like purchaser purchasee relationship and figure out who is actually here at risk. I think like, you know, when you look at some of these things, there's technical solution around reputation where you can also sort of build a score of at least good behavior. Does that mean that the same agent maybe under different identity has also bad behavior? Maybe. Is that for all use cases a problem? No, right? There's some where it's sufficient to know that this endpoint I'm currently consuming from will, you know, have an incentive to play this repeated game of still serving me with good behavior once I call them. So I think it's very, very important for anyone who is building these use cases to look at this with specific, or to build infrastructure actually here, to look at the specific use cases rather than sort of assume a sort of general reputation magic device that will sort of just zoom in and solve everything. I don't think that will happen. Now to your points.
Can I jump in there, David? I think that is such an important point. You know, looking at use cases. I used to work at Amazon. We used to call it customer obsession. You don't design in the abstract, you design with a real problem. So I think, David, your point there is very well made. We can do a lot of what ifs, but we need to look at an actual problem. So thank you for making that. Okay, sorry, let's go on to the most exciting agentic use case you see now.
Yes, so I will not be tempted by the hesitation about talking too general. I will be very specific in a second, but just one thing which I think also can be helpful for the discussion in this context specifically of the question is like agents can be a very loaded term, as we already learned, and I think like often people particularly conflate this sort of agent that really is more like a being, like we human beings. We don't have a specific purpose that actually evolves as we go through life and we change our meaning and seek it and whatnot. And then on the other hand, you have these sort of product agents. So it's like an app, really, what a consumer wants from it, or a business, but it has more autonomy than maybe like a rules-based app, right? And I think it really matters when we talk about sort of specific use cases, which one we mean, which one we're designing for. Because like, for instance, guardrails are very, very meaningful for product kind of agent, but they're almost the antithesis for a being kind of agent, right? Because like that will probably want to get rid of its guardrail. So just want to get that out. But staying with product agents, I do think that we've kind of looked into this from many, many angles, and I think what's very clear to us is that there is sort of clear challenges to actually bring this to consumers because of the fact that consumers don't actually have that much, let's say, discretionary capital that they're willing to fund an agent with. And so I think especially for the next few years, we'll still see that users are most willing to outsource tasks to agents where the budget is small and where the outcome is rather verifiable. And so that's why we're not surprised that prediction markets sort of works, because there is like an after the fact. I can say whether my agent actually did well or not. Similarly applies for other trading use cases. But for instance, in like a social context, even in some of these sort of research context, I think it's much harder to see whether if you have a research agent that's out there and you purchase from them and sort of they've been running for a day, is that now good or bad, right? Like it's sort of subjective. So I'm most excited about these sort of more verifiable domains, to put it blunt.
So, Will, I think he just slammed your use case earlier about the research. I'm not sure. So for you, what is your most exciting agentic use case? Do you have one?
Yeah, so I'd argue that there's already massive amounts of agentic commerce happening today, which is that if we view agentic commerce as what we talked about earlier, which is non-human payments for services, every single LLM router and LLM wrapper is participating in some form of agentic commerce today. Your Open Router, your Cloudflare AI Gateway, or your equivalent, it's taking in requests from humans or agents, depending on the circumstance. It's looking at those requests and applying some kind of sometimes smart model routing or wherever the user is directed to. And then it's coordinating with other APIs and services to ensure those requests land in the right place. And that means that all of the tools that people are using today, GitHub Copilot, Cursor, Open Router, Cloudflare AI Gateway, we're already engaging with it, especially given the fact that it's often our agent now deciding whether to ask follow-up questions. So the agent is already making autonomous spend decisions by choosing to make more API calls. I think that that's the start of what this future will look like, which is a human kicks off an initial request. I think that'll be the foreseeable future. That's my own personal view, but I think like full autonomy is some ways away. But then an agent can take over, and as we saw with Fable, like Fable's biggest innovation from Anthropic was not necessarily the quality of the responses, though that was much higher, but its ability to perform incredibly long-running tasks. It can be kicked off by a human and operate, in my experience, for like an hour or two on a task without needing human intervention. So I think the shape of this looks similar for a lot of domains. Booking travel, making purchases of goods, give it a task, it goes, it works for a few hours, it comes back with something. We're already doing that for APIs that already exist today.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And you said this is going to be, big. Gartner projects it's going to be trillions of dollars by 2030 that will be done autonomously. I do have a new question coming in though, and this is, kind of a comment. It's from Noah AI, and he or she, I assume it's a he, I don't know. He said, thank you very much for this particular space because we're learning a lot. So I do want to do a big call out to Yap Global, who set it up, and Olas, who sponsored it too. So thank you for those comments. We love hearing that this is helping you. One of the questions that he has is, what has to change for an AI agent to hold and move funds safely and independently? Nitya, this sounds like a good question for you. What has to change for an agent to hold and move funds safely and independently? And Noah AI, thank you for sending me that question. I really appreciate it. So if you guys want to send questions, I am on X, Sandy_Carter. You can just send those in or send them to Global, and they'll also ping me here. Nitya, what do you think about this question from Noah AI?
Oh, I love this question. So thank you, Noah. My view here is that I think we have some benefits and drawbacks with agentic commerce that's stablecoin driven in particular. The first is that is guardrails, and I know we've talked about guardrails in a number of different ways. My belief is actually that guardrails on stablecoins are much better than the guardrails that we have available to us in the fiat world, where if we're doing a credit card transaction, you have to play by a set of rules. And these rules have been evolved over time, and they're great, but they're not perfect. You might have different merchants that have different risk tolerance. You might have merchants that are more willing to accept certain transactions that have a counterparty risk associated with them. But what programmable guardrails allow us to do is it allows each of us to set our threshold for risk. And this is on the kind of seller side. And then on the buyer side, it allows us to set these fully programmable conditions for how assets leave our control. So this can look like time of day restrictions. It could look like spending limits, which are very popular. There's one I really enjoy, which is spending limits with triggers. So let's say I want to allow my agent to make any transaction under $5 without any intervention. And for any transaction over $5, I want to complete a 2FA. And so this is actually much more similar to what I think we see in the traditional finance world, but also what we can start to see on stablecoins as well. The other thing that I think is really interesting is being able to use novel indicators of risk. So yes, blockchains can use on-chain information to make decisions, and a lot of the guardrail systems today use on-chain information, like what smart contract are you interacting with? What is the address of the receiver? But I think we can go pretty far beyond that into off-chain information as well. Has this seller received an unusually large number of credit card payments for a similar good? Is this seller currently kind of experiencing fraud? Is this seller's website down? Has the seller's website been hacked? Like all of these kind of data points that exist in the real world can be leveraged when it comes to whether or not to release a transaction. And we can all set these guardrails. And we can all set these rails and conditions for how money moves. Like I actually like to think about stablecoin payments as anyone can design their own rails. And so while we have, today we have wires, ACH, credit cards, with stablecoins that we can all make our own rails.
I like that. Everybody can make their own rails. David, I'm gonna send this one back to you because I believe that Pearl Connect gives a coding agent like Claude Code, which I use all the time, a wallet that it can use to trade on prediction markets, like we've been talking about Polymarket, my favorite. So can you just walk us through what that looks like? And I want to connect this back to the guardrails that Nitya talked about. What guardrails do you have that stop things from going wrong?
Yeah, actually it ties nicely to a point Will was making earlier. There's indisputably enormous sort of, let's say, agentic commerce, or request responses flowing between coding agents that someone has running, the client of locally, and whoever's the company behind it. And like we all, including myself, probably love them a lot. I would call this a hub-spoke model because what you effectively have is one provider that everyone dials into. And let's say your coding agent, even when it does web requests or most of the things it does, will flow via this hub. Now, of course, you have MCPs and sort of certain CLIs locally that sort of can break that open, fortunately, and so you do have, it interacting with your local file system, maybe some MCPs that are not the hub, but I would still say it's sort of a quite centralized thing. And what I find quite interesting with this agentic commerce is that, yes, of course, we will have that, and I think we can have a lot of efficiency gains there from all the innovations Cloudflare, Para, others are making, and I don't want to minimize this at all, but the interesting question is also, can we more have like sort of spoke to spoke, smaller players? Can a consumer directly call into someone's website with a micropayment, like for instance Cloudflare's offering, to purchase some content there for a cent or so that is instrumental to get work done? And I think that for me is the more interesting sort of agentic economy, because it sort of brings back the early sort of idea of the internet, right? And sort of advances this into the age of AI. And so with Claude and our Connect product, and it also works with Codex and other coding agents, what you can do is basically, okay, you have your existing coding agent, and we've seen lots of people obviously use them to build sort of custom trading functionalities for prediction markets. And you sort of have two sets of problems. One is the whole wallet management, which Nitya spoke to a lot of points there. And we kind of solve that for the Connect users. They can just sort of click a bunch of buttons. They have a wallet and a skill that sort of automatically connects with their Claude instance or Codex instance, and then they're off to the races. And then the other big thing is that general purpose AI models, even like a Fable, are not optimized for doing well on prediction markets. If you out of the box just kind of give them a query like, here's market such and such, give me your best guess, you will wildly underperform what's possible, right? And so we obviously have been doing this since a long time, focused on this area. So on our supply side of the Olas marketplace, there's a bunch of agents that are very specialized on using state-of-the-art models to just offer good predictions. And so with Connect, you can tap into this too. So your coding agent can sort of decide by itself what it wants to purchase. Does it want to go by its vanilla API keys, or does it want to do these sort of micropayments via some sort of agentic marketplace that sort of sidecars to it? So that's the product. And then in terms of like where the guardrails sit, there's sort of an inverse relationship between more useful and less guardrails, and sort of the more, so the most care we've put into is that the wallet cannot do dangerous actions like, for instance, sign away its own ownership and things like that. But in order to, so there's sort of different layers of guards there, but in order, for instance, to interact with Polymarket is a very dynamic platform, so you can't upfront sort of whitelist all sorts of addresses. So there's also limits to how much guards you can put on a useful agent. And I think that's important in any guard discussion, that often upfront, the more intelligent your agent becomes, it's an inverse relationship to how much guard you can put on it. And so then the question is like, where does the guard sit? Can it sort of move into the model, or is there like a sidecar model that acts as a guard or something like that, rather than a set of rules? So yeah, I would say we have designed this as well as currently possible, but we also put a lot of earmarks on that for our users, that there's limits to the safety of these systems given their autonomous nature.
I use Claude. I also use Hermes. Do you also have the ability to use Hermes agents as well?
We should add it to the list if you put in a feature request here.
I like Hermes. I used to use OpenClaw, but then, of course, everything changed. So, hey, Will, I have an interesting question from you, and thank you. Danish. I'm assuming that he's Danish because his handle is Danish. He said, "Wow, Sandy, I had no idea that Cloudflare was now supporting agents because they've been known for blocking bots. So how did agents become part of Cloudflare's mission? This is a wow for me."
Yeah, we get that question a lot about the tensions between bots and agents, and we spend a lot of time internally talking about the differences between bots and agents. I think the most important thing in my mind is, one, is that there's a difference between a good bot and a bad bot. For example, if a bot is going to go research a purchase for you and then make that purchase for a website or software, everyone would say that that's a good bot. It's a bot that's leading to transactions, tying into a business needs. Meanwhile, if a bot is trying to, scrape all your content and, resell it or, take it without compensation, in many cases that's a bad bot. Though not even always, because, for example, at Cloudflare, we love it when bots scrape our documentation because we want our documentation to be in more places. If you're a media outlet reliant on ads, you probably don't love it when bots scrape your content. So good bots versus bad bots is not always a clear line. What we want to do is we want to give site owners the power to decide for themselves. Many SaaS solutions choose not to block bots from accessing their content, and many media outlets do. And that's great. They should have those tools that fit their use case. The second thing I'd note is that agents blur this line even more, because the traditional vision of a bot was like some fully like automated thing that would just go around the web, like, you know, your classic search engine bot or similar crawler that's just looking at millions upon millions of pages with very little human input or steering. Whereas now, if you say, hey, go research this product for me, there's an agent, they're acting on your task. They're going to go, they're going to collect information, and they're going to come back to you saying, here's what I found. Is that a bot? I mean, strictly speaking, yes, but it's acting at the direction of a human, and it's finding the pages that a human would have found, and it's finding dozens like a human would, and not millions like many traditional web bots do. So these lines are getting very blurry, and with Cloudflare we want to empower people and site owners to decide what parameters are best for them. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all solution. I don't think that will exist for a while all of the underlying tech changes so quickly. But if a bot is a good bot for you and a bad bot for someone else, we want to give you the tools to decide that.
Interesting. Yeah, it is interesting that that's right. You guys used to. I didn't even think about it until Danish brought this up. So thank you for that question, Danish. Nitya, I've got a question for you from Flipper Trade. Flipper Trade says that they're very curious about agents because they're a trading platform. They're wondering what changes about your wallet design when the end user is an autonomous agent instead of a person. Does anything change?
Great question. Similar to what Will had shared, because we primarily serve developers, we do recognize that there are a lot of different choices that different teams and products want to make with respect to this. And so we've mainly taken on the role of providing options. So a few of the common options that developers choose. In some cases, developers will choose to have agent identities directly tied back to the user's identity. And that user identity is usually one or more authentication methods that they've used to access that platform. In some cases, developers will choose to have agents that have this like kind of one-to-many relationship, and agents that each have their own unique identity that is not necessarily tied back to a particular individual or particular authentication method. So like team trading is kind of a classic example of this, where you might have a platform where you want to allow friends to jointly provision an agent that then trades on a prediction market, for example. So we provide a lot of different tools there. I think the biggest thing that we have seen is that we've talked a lot about guardrails. One thing that we haven't yet talked about is who actually decides what the guardrails should be. I think it's quite accepted that the user will likely be the one who determines whether to enable a guardrail or not. But this notion that I think we're all gonna sit and kind of fiddle with the specific addresses we want to allow our agent to interact with, or kind of fiddle with what chains it's allowed on, or like set all of these different parameters, I think is not realistic. And so what we have kind of taken, we've taken a page from OAuth actually, which has, I think, very much solved this problem, not in the financial domain, but in this general permission domain. So we allow developers to propose guardrails, and then we leave it to users to accept those guardrails. And this accomplishes a couple of things. First, it allows the developer to determine and curate relevance. Which smart contracts is the user going to interact with in this platform? What are the relevant dollar amounts? Are users likely to be doing transactions under $1 or over $100? All of these things kind of determine what the appropriate guardrail should be. And then similar to OAuth, users can either choose to accept those or not. And then the next time they log in, and as they continue to build trust with these platforms, they can provide progressively more permissions. So this is kind of how we've navigated the curation problem. But I think it's not said enough that if we have these guardrails, somebody has to set and configure them. And I think not enough thought is being paid to who is ultimately doing that.
That's great. I hadn't thought about that, Nitya, until you just brought it up. So I just wrote that down. I'm going to go explore that one because I think that is very important question and one I hadn't thought of at all. So thank you for that. So we've got like 9 minutes left. I'm assuming all of you guys can stay till top of the hour. I'm going to do just a couple of kind of round robin questions. If anybody on X has a question, if you just DM me, my DMs are open. I'll try to get to some of those too. If not, I'll try to connect you guys later as well, or I know Yap Global will do that too. So what is the biggest blocker right now to mainstream adoption of agentic commerce? I'm going to give you kind of a multiple choice. I guess you can add one in too if you want to. But is it trust? Is it infrastructure? Is it the UX? Or is it regulation? Or I guess it's like a floating, whatever you think. Who wants to start? David, I'll pick
UX.
you. Yeah, okay.
UX, it's always UX.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about why do you think the UX is the blocker to mainstream? Is it just too,
Because I think, for better or worse, trust is a function of UX in some sense. So you can have terrible trust primitives and somehow the UX lulls people into a sense of wanting to do something or not, and vice versa. So, and then obviously if you don't have a baseline of infrastructure, you're not going to get started. But I think we're in a position where, stablecoins are there, we heard about it. There's a lot of different payments protocols now there and settlement protocols, and will they evolve? I'm sure will we see more there, but I think like real iteration on the UX, and like I said some earlier in the call, I think for consumer often this travel use case comes up. I find it a bit unrealistic. I don't see that many consumers wanting to have an agent spend $1,000. That's like more than a lot of people spend for an entire year for some purchases, and then they probably wouldn't immediately outsource it to an agent. But sure, like for some tech exec might make sense. I think the wide class of consumers will want to spend small amounts, and the question is like, where can I spend little but gain a lot, in perceived value? And I think there's like a lot of new use cases to be explored there.
Yeah, I think UX, eliminates the friction. And if you have frictionless whatever you have, it does instill trust. So I like the way that you worded that. Nitya or Will, what's the biggest blocker? Trust, infrastructure, UX, regulation, or free-for-all?
I can go next. This is going to be a kind of a many of the above, but I think a central point around trust specifically is security. So we have taken a lot of time to think about what are the right ways to kind of encode the complexity of a payment with the transaction. So transactions are so basic from a blockchain perspective. You sign a transaction and the funds move. Many of us who've worked in payments know that that's really not how most of our real world payments work. There are a lot of individual steps along the way, a lot of different parties that participate in whether or not a transaction gets approved, on what timeline, how it gets settled. So one thing that we have really been focusing on is the key management layer here. So we use something called distributed MPC. This makes it such that the full private key is never in one place. And when you think about this complicated trust relationship between the platform, the user, and their agent, having multiple participants in the key management and the key signing better encodes, in our opinion, the trust relationship between these different parties and the various roles that they each have. And so for us, a lot of it comes down with trust, security, and then ultimately the design of a key management system.
Interesting. Key management is super important. Well, last take.
Yeah, on my side, it's also UX. So take stablecoin micropayments. You want someone to be able to deposit $1 that feels like a regular purchase of credits. You want them to be able to spend the $1 as $1. You want them to be able to then withdraw the $1 as $1, all via a regular login screen that feels like every other login screen. That has only really come into place over the last few months. Logging in was solved by groups like Para and other wallet providers that have made that part vastly easier. But then for years with stablecoins, you deposit $1 and you get back 99 cents. Then you move it somewhere else and you have 98 cents. And then they withdraw and they have 97 cents. And like, imagine if we built our financial system that way, where like little bytes are being actively taken off the top. Now, the financial system has plenty of bytes being taken in various places, but usually not off the movement of money itself. That's usually something that they want to incentivize. So that's gotten a lot better. There's a lot more efficient stablecoin conversions. There's better yield options. There's better on-ramps and off-ramps now. So I think over the next 6 to 18 months, we're going to see a whole lot more use cases where people don't realize it's stablecoins, don't realize it's agentic micropayments. They're just, oh, I give $1 to an agent and it goes and spends it. And that's my dream. I think
That's a good dream.
that the web will get there. Yeah.
Yeah, we
it's
can make
nearly
it
there.
easy enough. I keep saying if we can make it easy enough for my dad or my mom to do it, then we've arrived. I think that's cool. We only have 3 minutes. I do have questions. Thank you. I think it's Shirag, Alex, Lena, Nathan. Thank you guys for your questions. We're going to just go to kind of the last round robin, which is one big takeaway. Could be what's going to happen in the future or whatever your big takeaway is. Nitya, I'll start with you. What do you want everybody listening today to take away about agentic commerce and this whole area of agents?
Ooh. One, the agents are here. Like, agentic commerce is already happening. And I think it's really up to us to make sure that it happens safely.
Awesome. Will, what about you? Your one takeaway for everybody.
If you don't know you're using it, we've done our jobs right.
I like that too. Yeah, when the technology becomes transparent, we stop talking about it. It's here. Okay, love it. Okay, David, you get the last word.
Tough one. Yeah, I think going back to the UX, like there's so much room for exciting use cases that leverage all this, all these primitives, so that it's more spoke to spoke. As I say, I'm particularly excited about finding out how can, also with robotic AI coming into view, how can we have more sort of local to local, like localized sort of networks of AI agents where you can have meaningful differentiation. I think like there's this big question that on everyone's mind with like AI advancing. It's like, is everything centralizing? But then like there's this thing in the economy which we've seen always. It's like the competitive advantage of the localized knowledge and so on. And sort of as a counter example throughout history that centralizing all knowledge doesn't actually work that well in the end. And so I think like agentic commerce sort of speaks to that. And I feel like there's, we'll be surprised 10 years from now if we do this and look back, and we should. I think like it'll look very different than we expect now. And a lot of it will be very sort of, everyday life stuff. And I'm excited to see it come to fruition thanks to all these platforms and our work.
Awesome. So I'll just close by saying I do think that AI native payments and agentic commerce are one of the biggest use cases today. Agents are already holding funds and initiating transactions. So thank you for everybody listening. And a suggestion for Olas and Yap Global, Daisy, Orr, Kylie, Mark all said we need more time. Let's do it again. So for you guys, thank you. Thanks for having us, and thanks for allowing all of us to participate. Will, Nitya, David, thank you guys for a great conversation and for sharing your insight and knowledge. Really appreciate it. We'll talk soon. Thank you.